okay engine, but even we said in our video that that was the least exciting part of that car.
And before you know it, we're driving 1,000 horsepower buses and no one can park anywhere.
The name Maserati goes a long way. It sounds exotic, even more so than Ferrari or Lamborghini. Attach the name and that striking trident logo to a car, and people are automatically impressed. In fact, the less they know about cars, the more impressed they are by the name Maserati. This phenomenon has given Maserati quite a bit of inertia through periods of some rather dull, uninspiring, and poorly built cars. Speckled in between them have been just enough stunners to keep the world interested in what they might do next, particularly since the arrival of their most recent stunner, the MC20 supercar. But when a company from an exotic-sounding place produces highly specialized sports and luxury cars in small volumes, we, the media, and you, the consumer, are expected to forgive a lot. The more specialized the car, the deeper the forgiveness of its flaws. The inverse is also true. But in 2023, nobody can survive building just sports cars anymore. Not Ferrari, not Lamborghini, not Aston Martin or Lotus, and certainly not Maserati.
Enter Maserati's new car, the Grecale. It's available in 3 flavors, 2 with engines for normal people and 1 for us crazies, the Trofeo, which goes very, very fast. Under the hood is the twin-turbo 3-liter V6 taken from the MC20 supercar. It has been detuned a little, 100 horsepower and 85 pound-feet of torque, but as you'll see, there's plenty left.
It's a mid-size sports crossover designed to compete in one of the most heavily contested segments on the planet right now, which is led by one deeply dominant player, the Porsche Macan GTS, a car with virtually no flaws.
A crossover is designed to do it all. It has to drive well, it has to carry things, it has to be comfortable, and it has to do all of this at a price that is approachable for everyday people, or in this case, well-off people. It's not an exotic supercar. That means things have to work properly, and it has to have nice features and be comfortable. It's not a weekend toy, it's a daily driver.
It just so happens to be a very, very fast daily driver. Ooh, with good brakes too. Folks, I got to take a quick second to talk about today's sponsor, Exter. They are a new company that was tired of the old way and the old wallet. So they reimagined and redesigned the wallet for the 21st century in leather, in carbon fiber, and more. But it's not just about wallets. They have a bunch of everyday carry stuff to modernize and improve your life. Their iPhone case holds extra SIM cards and has space for some cash in the back for when you're traveling. You never know when you might need it. They have credit card size tracking devices, so if you lose your wallet, you can find it anywhere in the world. They've got credit card size multi-tools, so you can always have the right tool for the job in a pinch without having to carry a big knife or pliers-based device everywhere you go. And of course, there are the wallets, which are amazing, especially this carbon fiber one. It's super useful. It's very light, very strong. The credit cards fan out like this, which is super cool when you press the button. The strap for cash, the RFID protection, it's all in there. And for a limited time, click the link below or go to shop.exter.com/TheSmokingTire and use code TST at checkout to get 35% off Exter products. You don't have to remember it. Hit the link in the video description. It'll take you straight there. Code TST for 35% off. And thank you to Exter for sponsoring today's video. Wow! Look at it go! Maserati says that the Trofeo run the quarter mile in 11.6 on its way to a top speed of 177 miles an hour. Not only will that absolutely walk sports cars of just a few years ago, it's on par with some of today's. In fact, those numbers line up pretty close with the current generation 911 Carrera T, a very focused, enthusiast-oriented sports car. Although Maserati's gotten quite a lot of mileage out of letting people believe their cars were powered by Ferrari engines, even when they really weren't, this really is the engine from the MC20. It even has the Nettuno pre-spark ignition system derived somewhat distantly from F1 technology.
Woo! Wow, it is very quiet in here given how fast I am going. And I know that when the car goes by outside and it upshifts or downshifts, it is loud. It crackles and echoes off this canyon and shakes some rocks loose, but inside, it is a pretty mellow experience, which is probably a good thing because honestly, hot V6s are not my favorite sound in the world. To buy a Maserati, I think you need to be a little bit more interested in arts, romance, and things like that. Who cares about residual value? Finance like nobody's watching. Maserati hasn't had a racing career in basically 60 years. And when they show up to a track test for the last couple of years, they're usually the underdog. You know, they're not going to be as fast as the Ferrari. They're not going to be as sharp. Even Corvettes usually dunk on them. They make good power, but they just don't have the sophisticated engineering that other companies do. However, this Giorgio platform, which it shares with the Stelvio, is good. When we drove the Levante a few years ago, we were shocked at how good it handled in the corners, how well it talked to you, how it settled things, how it handled bumps. And this is in the same vein.
The motor feels hot. The Trofeo makes 25 more horsepower than the BMW X3M and 90 more horsepower than the Macan GTS, and splits those two in weight. So the performance is absolutely staggering. Way angrier and rowdier than the engine that the Macan GTS uses. That's an okay engine, but even we said in our video that that was the least exciting part of that car. Here, this is a pretty good car. I'm very impressed with Maserati's ability to build a pretty complete package here. But the engine is absolutely the star of the show, and it lets you know it every time you hit the start button. But when it hits that rev limiter, it doesn't kill power either. People who care about driving designed this package. The handling is amazing. The steering is really sharp. The steering ratio is really fast, and the steering wheel is nice. The pace is absolutely shocking. This thing makes an enormous amount of power, but also has really good poise. It may be knocking on the door of 4,600 pounds, but you wouldn't know it the way it gets around these corners. There's just enough body roll, but then just enough resistance to body roll. They found a very nice balance.
This car is big. One of the things I don't like about it is the size. It really lands in the middle between the large SUVs, the Cayennes and the Levantes, etc., and then the smaller sporting crossovers like the Macan and the X3, even the F-Pace. But when you get it into the corners, I mean, the front wheel is talking to me mostly through the center cowl here, through my leg, but I can hear what the tires are doing. The steering is the right weight. I like the rack speed. And man, it is fast. Fast! Woo! It pulls out of the corner. You can really feel it send the torque to that outside rear wheel. If you're in a safe environment and turned full traction off, this thing would absolutely drift. I have full confidence it would do that. That's amazing.
Now, although the Grecale Trofeo is very expensive, it starts at $104,000, it does come pretty loaded up with stuff. On top of the super hot motor, you get adaptive air suspension, you get 21-inch wheels with Bridgestone summer performance tires, you get 14-way adjustable seats, heated and cooled. You get wireless, Android Auto, and Apple CarPlay. You get a 21-speaker Sonos Faber stereo that absolutely bumps. You get 3-zone automatic climate control, adaptive cruise with lane keep assist, and a whole bunch more gauges and gadgets that help you track your performance both on the road and off it.
I really like the design of the interior of this car. If you get in this car, if you're shopping and you look in this car, it looks expensive. It looks nice. I like this brushed aluminum work. I like the way the vents stretch all the way from one end of the dash to the other. I think it's a really cohesive design, really well done, and it absolutely looks appropriate for the price point. The gauge cluster is really clear, has all the technology I could want, but not too much like a BMW. BMW's cluster is just, frankly, hard to read. I don't like the shape of it. This looks on par with the price point, very clear. I like the way it's laid out. The screens do a good job of presenting every control. You have endless screen space, so here's your seats, and here's your temperature, and here's everything, and here's your traction control. It's all right there. It's not hidden in a menu, which is good. Why should it be? You have screens, use them.
I'm impressed with the rear seat room. It's comfortable. I can sit behind myself just fine. And the trunk is big, and the seats fold down pretty much flat. So you can load a bunch of stuff in here, use it to go skiing, haul your kids around, haul your stuff around. It is a real crossover. It doesn't really make a lot of compromises in the name of space. And it feels like it's built well. The materials are very nice, the fit and finish are very good, and unlike when we drove the Levante 2 years ago, it feels like a new product. The Levante felt like you were putting decade-old technology into a new platform, and it made you wonder why. Even though this shares most of its platform with the Alfa Romeo Stelvio, it still feels like a brand new car. This thing will keep up with sports cars, for sure. You need a fast car to get away from this on the Canyon, man. Maserati is on a roll. The MC20 was awesome. And this is a little ripper, this thing. There are, of course, a few quirks.
There's no volume knob. And that is annoying. I know that there is a volume button right here on the back of the steering wheel, or this slider, which for some reason is not backlit, which is very surprising to me. But when I've driven cars that have volume controls on the wheel and the knob, I would say I use the knob 60% of the time. It just allows you to adjust things far more quickly and keep your eyes on the road while you're doing so. With this, operating this slider all the way across this vast valley, that is silly.
The first time you drive this car, you will be very confused. The start button actually is blacked out until you turn the car on. So it's only once the car is running that it even says start on the button. That's weird. The shifter buttons are hidden between the two screens and really disappear. And even the headlights are operated through the touch panel that's mainly used for the climate control. Now, you learn all this stuff over the first couple of drives, and in the case of the headlights, you pretty much just set them to automatic and then you never touch it again. But what I'm saying is, it's got kind of a steep learning curve for otherwise basic stuff. If you bought one, you'd figure it out. But if you run a rental company, I would not stock these in my fleet because you're going to be getting calls from some very confused customers. And I can't help but think that putting all this stuff on a touchscreen is sort of leaning on tech to mask the cost cutting that comes from getting rid of physical buttons. And even in a $100,000 plus vehicle, you gotta make the margins, and this is how they do it. But at least the drive mode selector is on a scrolling, clickable wheel. It's pretty much the only manual control in the whole vehicle.
And those drive modes are distinctive. We have off-road, comfort, GT, sport, and of course, Corsa. Now, in comfort mode, the steering's a little bit lighter, the suspension is in its softest setting, the throttle response is a little bit gentler. It's meant for cruising. You know, you're not trying to win any races, trying to maximize your fuel economy and waft along and be very, very comfortable. Sport is a different story. The suspension firms up, we have a new indicator that says S, the steering is definitely heavier, definitely sharper, as is the throttle response. Downshifts are quicker, even in automatic mode. Right there when I was on the brakes, it was downshifting exactly where I wanted it to. Turn the knob once more, you're in Corsa. Things are hardcore now. Well, actually, they're just kind of hard. The suspension is in its hardest setting. It literally has an H next to the shock indicator. And I would say that even on this road that looks pretty smooth, and the tarmac is very new and of good quality, it is a little bit bumpy. On a really, really smooth racetrack or a road that is equivalent, that's what you would want. You want this hard Corsa setting. But thankfully, someone at Maserati added a button for independent shock control. So, although I am in Corsa mode, I'm hit the button and the shocks are in sport, so they soften up a little bit. So I have the fast shifting, the quick acceleration, the sensitive throttle, but just a little bit more compliance in those shocks. Wow.
It's fast and it handles properly. But frankly, the Levante Trofeo did those things too. In isolation, the Levante Trofeo is actually a great choice until you start comparing it to a Cayenne Turbo GT. So, how does the Grecale compare to some very stiff competition from elsewhere in Europe? Now, compared to the Mercedes GLC 63 and the Macan GTS, the V8 in that GLC 63 is extremely rowdy and fun. And actually, I think that this engine pairs up well with that engine, even though it's down 2 cylinders. Compared to the Macan GTS, this engine is way more exciting and pulls way harder with its 90 extra horsepower. But the Porsche is such a fluid package, and with that PDK gearbox, it feels so luxurious as you go through the gears because it is so smooth while also being so responsive. Plus, you can still customize that Macan GTS in a lot of ways. And unless you really, really load it up and go insane with the options, it is noticeably cheaper by about 10 to 15% than this particular variant of Grecale.
The competition in this space is fierce, but what I like about it is that all the cars are really distinctive. The X3M starts at $75,000, makes a little bit less horsepower than this, but is the quickest to 60 in the segment, 0 to 60 in just 3.3 seconds. It is an amazing vehicle in terms of its performance. It is like a lifted GTR, really. But it is way too stiff. Even in its softest setting, it rides way too stiff. The Jaguar F-Pace SVR starts around this price. It is the heaviest of the group. It's 4,800 pounds. It does make the most horsepower, 550 from a supercharged V8, which means it also sounds the best in my opinion. But because of that weight, despite all that horsepower, it's not that much quicker to 60. It's only 0.1 seconds quicker to 60 than this car. So where does this land? Well, the power's in the middle, and it's actually one of the slower cars, only quicker than the Macan GTS. But where it really wins is space, because it's the biggest, so of course it should have the most space. This is 6 inches longer than most of its competition, and it's only a few inches shorter than the Cayenne or the Levante. So it's actually created this new market of size in between the mid-size performance crossover and the full-size performance crossover. The danger is that people will continue to ask for more. So if this car is bigger and people choose it over the X3, over the F-Pace, well then those shoppers will tell their dealerships, we would like more space, and then those cars get bigger. And then the large SUVs get bigger, and da-da-da-da-da, and before you know it, we're driving 1,000 horsepower buses and no one can park anywhere. But as a thing to get around in, this is a good-looking, fast, very comfortable, well-sorted out vehicle. Well done.
You know, I put Maserati in the same basket as I put Aston Martin. I want to root for them. You know, it's a brand that's got so much history and so much style and so much elegance. I want the cars to be good. But this is one of the good ones. This is one of the cars that will keep you rooting to see what Maserati does next. The thing about comparing one car to another is that for many people, the objective best isn't really what matters. It's about expression and identity, and you don't want to have the same car as everyone else. So if I say the Macan GTS is the best, a totally reasonable response might be, but what if I don't want a Macan? In that case, the Grecale can be great on its own merits, stand out from the mainstream, and that is totally enough to justify its purchase. With this and the MC20, Maserati is finally worth taking seriously when it comes to style, speed, and substance.
And remember, always fight your tickets. Use code TST10 on the Off the Record app available in the Android and iOS store, or go to offtherecord.com/TST.